So, I decided to do another roll the mic thing because I kind of enjoy doing these, and I wanted to talk today about why I don't personally accept the label of writer and have it apply to me personally. I find that ever since I started writing stories when I was in my late teens, I've never, and I'm 27 now, I've never really ascribed the label of writer to myself. And the reason for that is, well, there's a number of reasons. And the first one, mainly, is that when you mention that you write in any capacity, people always take that as an invitation to say, oh, I'm going to write a story now, and I'm going to publish it, and I'm going to tell you all my ideas, and I want you to basically just give me the green light to publish my bullshit. Most of it is usually very egotistical, and a lot of it is quite self-centered. Most of the time they just write diaries about themselves, like anyone would fucking read that shit. And it's not like diaries of like someone in a very important job who might actually have some interesting stories. It's not like a police officer or a soldier's diary or a politician's diary. It's, oh, I'm dropping out of media studies and this is how I feel about it. It's people like Adrastea and Stetson Hardwick who are always eager to write about their lives when they don't do anything from one day to another. And then when anybody says anything to them afterwards about any other topic, like, well, I'm a writer, so I'm important. My job is writer. And it's actually embarrassing, because if I ever say that, I'm more or less picturing myself in the same category as them, and that just really is embarrassing. And I've published 2 books, and I still refuse to call myself an author or a writer, because quite honestly, I'm not. And the reason why is because I actually write shit and don't just sit on Tumblr all day writing about writers' problems and saying, oh, well, I haven't actually put pen to paper in about 5 years, but I'm totally a writer because every day I write some bullshit about how I've not put pen to paper for 5 years. I also don't feel a need to tell people what is and isn't acceptable in the realm of fucking writing. Like people who are like, oh, fanfiction's not real writing, but writing a self-insert boring piece of shit that's mostly ripped off from other intellectual properties is totally writing, guys. You know, like the idea of honing your skills through basically writing something with established characters and setting is bad, but never putting pen to paper and just constantly wanking yourself off every morning because you published some crap on a website that nobody fucking read 5 years ago, that is what Edgar Allan Poe and fucking H.P. Lovecraft aspired to be. That's what William Shakespeare thought of himself when, you know, he came up with all his shit. And I'm not saying that these people shouldn't be able to claim that they're authors or writers or whatever, because, yeah, technically they are. Like, not even technically they are. But the word to me is so tainted, because my fantasy story that took me about 3 months to write, which was based on works that took me over a year to write a few years ago, which I polished up over the course of 3 months to publish, I have to lump in with some jackass who rolled out of bed, found out that his cousin Dave published something, and then decided that he was going to write about the time that he got his dick stuck in the washing machine, and now he's going on every social media site insisting that he cannot be criticised because he is an author. And then he'll spend the next 5 years just going on social media and constantly bragging about writer's problems, and constantly insisting that he has writer's block, never considering the possibility that he just had one idea and it was shit to begin with. I also love as well how when you mention it, that you actually have written something in your life, people just talk at you for hours about their shitty story that they've just fucking cooked up over the course of 20 minutes, and they never let you get a word in, and they just constantly talk and talk and talk about just whatever fucking nothing they're conjuring up that they're probably not even going to finish because they have no work ethic. And then they're just like, yeah, these are my stories. They're not stories, they're concept ideas that you've half-arsed and honestly have no appeal. I am not invested in a single fucking thing you've said for the past 3 hours. And here's the thing as well, like, I know At some points, I'm probably going to sound a bit gatekeepery, but I want to make it quite clear I have no delusions I should tell anybody. I don't want to tell anybody what they can and can't publish or even what they can and can't write about. I ran a platform for years. In fact, it still exists that people can just write what they want on it. And honestly, for the most part, I don't care what that thing looks like, what it's about, or anything, provided that it doesn't go into territory that I just simply do not want to host. And I can imagine what you could probably imagine what that would entail. And I honestly have way more respect for someone who has learning difficulties and writes something that's actually interesting. Like, one of my friends wrote this really interesting story about vampires and werewolves, which was unfortunately really difficult to get published because they needed someone to proofread it. And when I say proofread, I mean spend fucking hours going over every individual bit of text because of so many problems. And I tried to do it as a favour, and I just could not find that kind of time unpaid to go through the entire thing for hours and hours and hours. It took me about a week to get through everything, and it was crazy. And it's a shame because if I could freeze time and just create a bubble where I could just do all that without losing the rest of my life to do it, I would, because I really would like to see that story make it into the world, but sadly it's just not meant to be. And I'll always respect that kind of work over, oh, I'm writing about my boring fucking life to stroke my own ego and so that I can brag about being an author, and I'll self-publish on Amazon because nobody else would publish this fucking shit. Bringing down what it means to be a self-publisher on Amazon, which originally could have been a way for authors who aren't recognised to get out there, regardless of whether or not they have mass market appeal and actually stand a chance of having people buy their book. Now it's just fucking shelved in the middle of volumes upon volumes of worthless shit, published by people who have no interest in anything other than stroking their own ego. And it's a shame because I just don't feel comfortable expressing that this is my hobby and this is what I do. I seriously don't. And over the years, I've just kind of tried to make people forget that this is what I do, who I don't feel comfortable telling, simply because I know the traps that are laid out for people who enjoy that kind of creative pursuits. And unfortunately, it's always about them, and it's always about something that they've just half-arsed when you've spent years honing what you do. And no matter where you're at, you've still spent that time and effort trying to make something good, and then they just come along like, oh, I'm half-arsing it off the back of my hand. I'm just like you. Tee-hee. And I feel like it, as a term, has been hijacked. It used to mean people who put their thoughts to paper in whatever capacity. Now it's just a fucking narcissist who, once again, needs to be able to have everyone look at them and read their thoughts out of their own head and worship them for giving out their thoughts, only to then run out of work ethic and then spend the next 5 or so years insisting that the reason why they haven't written anything isn't because they're fucking lazy and don't actually have a passion for it at all, but because they just simply can't, or they just simply haven't got that creative spark. And then eventually they'll start writing about deconstructing writing and language itself to signal to the entire fucking planet that they've completely run out of ideas, because writing about all the girls and guys that they creeped on in high school and writing about how wonderful they are has just simply, it was a well that was once plentiful and then is now run dry because there's nothing else to talk about in that category and they've got nothing else to add. And rather than do some research and learn some cool shit to talk about in your book or base your ideas on, you're instead gonna go on social media and whine about writers' problems. Fuck off. I legitimately do not want... I don't deserve to be labelled the same as those kinds of people, and unfortunately that's just what I see whenever I hear that word now. And it's honestly sad because there are some legitimately good people and good authors who get buried under this shit and lumped into the same category.
Welche neugierige Babbrüchen.